Hello doctors, welcome back to Pirates of Medicine. Today we are going to continue with the anatomy based series. Before we start, I would like to urge you to subscribe to our channel. A lot of you who watch the videos are not subscribed. So without any further ado, let's begin. The 71st question is that a 35-year-old man with trauma of his left hand was admitted to the traumatology department. Objectively, cut wound of palmar surface of the left hand, middle phalanges of the second and finger don't bend, or you can call it the bending motion is called as flexing. So the second to fifth middle phalanges, they do not flex. So what muscles are damaged? If you know the anatomy of the hand, you'll understand that each finger from the second to the fifth digit is made up of a distal, a middle and a proximal phalanx, the three bones in each finger, correct? The thumb is made up of the distal and the proximal phalanx, there is no middle phalanx. So in case of the second to the fifth finger, the distal phalanx of each finger is supplied by the deep flexor muscles of the digits. So you can call in Latin as flexor digitorum profundus. Similarly, the middle and the proximal phalanx of each finger are supplied by the tendon of flexor digitorum superficialis or the superficial finger flexor. So if you want to bend these middle phalanges or the proximal phalanges, then this muscle, the superficial flexor muscles of the digit, should work. So in the question, the patient was not able to bend the middle phalanges of the second to fifth finger. This shows that there is an injury of superficial finger flexors. Simple? I hope you understand. So deep finger flexors, they flex the distal phalanx, and the superficial finger flexors, they flex or bend the middle and the proximal phalanx. So this is the basic concept behind this. Let's go to the next one. So 72 question is rather simple. A 38-year-old patient came to the traumatology center and complained about an injury of his right hand. Objectively, the patient has a cut wound in the region of the thenar eminence on the right hand. Distal phalanx of the first finger cannot be flexed. What muscle was injured? So in the previous question we didn't talk about the thumb. Let's talk about the thumb because the first finger mentioned over here is our thumb. So you can see the thumb is made up of the distal phalanx and the proximal phalanx, and similarly the distal phalanx is supplied by the long flexor muscles of the thumb, and the proximal phalanx is supplied by the short flexor of the thumb. The bending of the thumb or flexing of the thumb, the distal phalanx is supplied by the long flexor and the proximal phalanx is supplied by the short brevis flexor pollicis brevis. So in the question, the distal phalanx was not being able to flex. So this means that the muscle that is injured is long flexor muscle of the thumb. So it is all about the muscle supplying which phalanx, and I hope you understand now. So this is the basic concept behind this. So the 73 question is that a patient with neuritis of femoral bone has disturbed flexion of the thigh as well as disturbed cruce extension in the knee joint. So two motions, there is disturbed flexion of the thigh and there is disturbed leg extension in the knee joint. So let's look at these movements first of all. So if you talk about the movement of the legs, this movement from the midline backwards is extension and forwards is flexion. This movement of the leg away from the midline, like in this direction, is abduction towards there, and back to the midline is adduction. And this is the internal rotation and external rotation. I think you can understand this. Similarly, if the motions of the knee joint, you can understand, if you are flexing your leg below the knee joint or at the level of knee joint, then you are moving the leg in this position, and if you are moving the leg back to the normal place, this is extension. So in the question, they are talking about disturbed flexion of the thigh. So they are talking about this motion, flexion of the thigh, because this is the motion at the hip joint. Correctly, the leg will move at the hip joint. So there is disturbed motion of this disturbed motion in this direction, the flexion, moving the leg forwards. And also there is disturbed leg extension in the knee joint. So extension means that moving the leg from the flexed position back to the normal position. So this is extension at the knee joint. So let's see. There are these muscles of the thigh, the anterior group, which are being innervated by the femoral nerve. The quadriceps femoris muscles, or the quadriceps muscles of the thigh, is responsible for extending the leg at knee joint and flexing the hip joint. So from right here you can see the quadriceps femoris muscle, and from its function you can clearly understand that in the question there must be an injury of the quadriceps muscle of thigh, and quadriceps muscle of the thigh is the only muscle which does that function out of all these options. So this is why the answer is quadriceps muscle of the thigh. I hope you understand. Extending the leg at the knee joint and flexing the thigh is a function of the quadriceps femoris muscle, and even the sartorius muscle flexes the knee joint and rotates the leg medially and flexes the thigh at hip joint, which is another muscle of the anterior group. But quadriceps femoris is the right answer according to the presentation of the patient, and this is why we'll go with quadriceps femoris muscle. So just go with the function and let's go to the next one. So in the specimen of one of the parts of respiratory system, a tubular organ was found. It has low epithelium, well-developed muscular tunic, glands and cartilage are absent. So remember, in a respiratory system, as you move towards the lowest particular part of the bronchial tree, the minor bronchus, the alveoli, the muscular tunic will be well developed and the amount of cartilage and glands will be decreased, because the main function of the minor bronchus is bronchospasm or bronchodilation. And as you go upwards from the minor bronchi to the major bronchi to the trachea, the amount of cartilage and the amount of glands will increase. So the organ which will have low epithelium, well developed muscular tunic, gland cartilage being absent is the minor bronchus. 75th question is that where should the catheter be for evacuation of lymph from the thoracic lymph duct be inserted? To understand this, let's look at the thoracic lymph duct. So you can see over here that the lymphatic system is over here. The thoracic duct is present right here on the left part of the body, and the right part of the body is supplied by the lymph supply is taken up by the right lymphatic duct. The left portion of the body is supplied by the drained by the thoracic duct, the left lymphatic duct as you can call it, and this part, highlighted light green part, is drained by the right lymphatic duct. So in order to, you can obviously understand, if you need to drain or evacuate the thoracic duct, then the most closest portion to evacuate it is from the left venous corner right over here. That is why the answer is left venous corner, because you can see that the thoracic duct, first of all, it is located towards the left part of the body, and the closest you can evacuate is from over here near the subclavian vein where it bifurcates, and this is the portion which is very easier. You can access it from the shoulder, and this is called the left venous corner. 76 is that a patient has difficulties with hand movement. Examination revealed inflammation of the common synovial sheath of the flexor muscles. It is known from the patient's anamnesis that he got stab wound of the finger a week ago. What finger was the most probably damaged? To understand this, we need to see the distribution of the synovial sheath of the muscles in the hand. So if you look at this, you will see that the common flexor sheath of the hand is directly continuous with the digital synovial sheath of the little finger, while the other fingers are not directly continuous with the common flexor synovial. So if there is an injury of the left finger, a purulent injury or an infection in the small finger, little finger, then it can spread to the common synovial sheath very easily. So this is what happened in the patient over here, that he got a stab wound of a finger which was digitus minimus, the smallest finger, which led to the inflammation of the common synovial sheath of flexor muscle. Simple anatomy: if you know that the synovial sheath of the little finger is connected with the common flexor synovial sheath, you'll understand the infection can spread from here to here pretty easily. Correct? So let's go to the next one. So an injured man has bleeding from the branches of carotid artery. For temporary arrest of bleeding, it is necessary to press the carotid artery to the tubercle of cervical vertebrae. Which vertebrae is it? But to understand this, we have to understand that what major points we can use for digital compression. Digital compression is the pressing of an artery to stop arrest bleeding. So for carotid artery, we have the transfer process of the C6 vertebrae, where we can compress the artery very easily to stop bleeding. For facial artery, we can compress at the edge of the mandible. Subclavian artery can be compressed at the level of the fourth rib. Brachial artery is compressed in the internal surface of the humerus. Femoral artery, it is compressed at the mid-inguinal point, about halfway between the pubic symphysis and the anterior superior iliac spine. So these are the various locations in which these different arteries can be compressed to arrest bleeding. So if you understand transverse process of the C6 vertebrae, that is why the answer is 6th vertebrae. 78th question is that as a result of the accident, a patient has intense painfulness and edema of the anterior cruce surface or the anterior leg surface. Dorsiflexion of the foot is hindered, function of which cruce muscle is most likely to be disturbed. So we did this question in the last video. We understood what dorsiflexion of foot is. To get a quick recap, let's look. So this movement of moving the foot upwards dorsally is called as dorsiflexion. And I told you in the last video that this movement is done by the muscle of the anterior group of the leg, which is the anterior tibial muscle. It controls the dorsal flexion of the foot, the supination of foot, and raises, most importantly, the medial border of the foot, which is inversion. This process, raising the medial border of the foot upwards. So if there is a injury in the anterior cruce surface and the dorsal flexion of foot is hindered, then the tibialis anterior muscle is most probably injured. I hope you understand. Let's go to the next one. A 40-year-old patient complains of intensive heartbeats, sweating, nausea, visual impairment, arm tremor, hypertension. From his anamnesis 2 years ago, he was diagnosed with pheochromocytoma. Hyperproduction of what hormones causes the given pathology? If you remember, then pheochromocytoma is the tumor of pheochromocytes, the cells which are present in the medulla and the cells which are responsible for secreting catecholamines, adrenaline, norepinephrine, and dopamine. So if there is a tumor of pheochromocytoma, then the amount of catecholamines will be increased in a body, which you can clearly see by the symptoms: intensive heartbeat, sweating, nausea, visual impairment, arm tremor, and hypertension. So catecholamines is the answer. So the 80th question is that a patient who suffers from cancer of the back of the tongue has an intense bleeding as a result of affection of dorsal lingual artery by the tumor. What vessel should be ligated to stop the bleeding? So to understand this, let's look at the blood supply of the tongue. The tongue over here is supplied, you can see, by the lingual artery. The lingual artery is the branch of the external carotid artery. It supplies the tongue, the sublingual gland, the gingiva and oral mucosa of the floor of the mouth. And there are 4 main branches of the lingual artery: the suprahyoid branch, the dorsal lingual branch, the deep lingual branch, and the sublingual branch. So in order, as you can see, there was a affection of the dorsal lingual artery, which is a branch of the lingual artery. So obviously, if you want to stop bleeding of the dorsal lingual artery, then you can just stop the bleeding by compressing or by ligating the lingual artery. It's just like in Hindi or in Indian we call it jad se khatam kar dena, which means to solve a problem at its root. So similarly, you can just ligate the lingual artery and stop the bleeding over here. Let's go to the next one. So 81st question is that a 58-year-old patient with acute cardiac insufficiency has decreased volume of daily urine, which is oligonuria. What is the mechanism of this phenomena development? So you can obviously understand that in case of cardiac insufficiency, the amount of blood reaching the kidney for filtration will be decreased because the hydrostatic pressure in the capillaries will be decreased. So there are 2-3 main pressures. The most important are the hydrostatic pressures in the glomerular capillaries, which promotes the filtration, and the oncotic pressure of the blood, which is due to the proteins in the blood, specifically the albumins, which opposes the glomerular filtration. So in case of acute cardiac insufficiency, amount of the hydrostatic pressure will be decreased, which would ultimately lead to decreased glomerular filtration. That is why the answer is A. So let's go to the next one. 82nd question is that an 18-year-old man was delivered to the hospital after a road accident. Examination at the traumatological department revealed multiple injuries of the soft tissues of the face in the region of the medial eye angle. The injuries caused massive hemorrhage. What arterial anastomosis might have been damaged in this region? So in the region of the medial eye angle, there is an anastomosis of two special structures. The angular artery ascending to the medial angle of the orbit and anastomosing with the dorsal branch of the ophthalmic artery. The angular artery over here is a branch of the external carotid artery, and the dorsal branch of the ophthalmic artery is a continuation of the internal carotid artery. So at the end, there is an anastomosis between the external and the internal carotid arteries, right over here with the medial eye angle. Ophthalmic artery anastomosing with the angular arteries branch. Correct? So external carotid artery being anastomosing with the internal carotid artery. So let's go to the next one. 83 question is that after a 2-year-old child has flu, there appeared complaints about the earache. A doctor revealed hearing impairment and inflammation of the middle ear. How did the infection penetrate into the middle ear? So this is a repeated question. The middle ear is connected to the nasopharynx with the auditory tube, the musculotubule canal containing the eustachian tube. So there must be the canal through which the infection penetrated the middle ear from the nasopharynx is through the auditory tube. I hope this is understandable if you have watched the last videos. 84th question is that the surgeon has to find the common hepatic duct during the operative intervention on the account of concrements in the gall ducts. The common hepatic duct is located between the leaves of. So we have a few ligaments of the hepatogastric region. First of all, we have the hepatoduodenal ligament. Hepatoduodenal ligament is the portion of the lesser omentum extending between the porta hepatis of the liver and the superior part of the duodenum. You can see over here, this is the hepatoduodenum ligament. And inside it, there are three major structures: the hepatic artery proper, or the proper hepatic artery, the portal vein, and the common bile duct. So out of all the options, the answer over here is the hepatoduodenal ligament, which contains the common hepatic duct, or the common bile duct. So anyway, another ligament of the hepatogastric region, the important ligament is this one, the hepatogastric ligament, which connects the liver to the lesser curvature of the stomach. It here contains the right and the left gastric arteries. Then we have another few ligaments of the liver. You can see this is the coronary ligament of the liver, so on the superior surface of the liver. Then the falciform ligament divides the lobes of the liver into right and left lobe. And we have a round ligament of liver, which is the continuation of falciform ligament, which connects the liver to the umbilicus. So these are the main ligaments, and you can see triangular ligament at the corner of the coronary ligament. There is a left triangular and the right triangular. These are the main ligaments of the hepatogastric region. So 85th question is that a cerebral trauma caused increase of ammonia formation. What glutamic acid or what amino acid takes part in removal of ammonia from cerebral tissue? So we have done this question in physiology, we have done this question in this videos, anatomy videos as well. So glutamic acid or the glutamate combines with ammonia with the help of glutamine synthetase to form glutamine, which carries the ammonia over here to the liver, where it is deaminated with the help of glutaminase and converted back to glutamate, and ammonia is used in the urea cycle. So glutamine or glutamate helps in removal of ammonia from the brain tissue. In the muscular tissue, on the other hand, ammonia is taken up by alanine, which goes to the liver, and in the hepatocyte it converts back and gives the ammonia and converts back to pyruvate. So this is how through the muscle the ammonia is taken up by alanine. In the brain it is taken by glutamate. So these are the two biomolecules which help to remove ammonia from these two tissues. 86th question is that a 40-year-old woman was admitted to the infectious disease department with high body temperature. Objectively, there are marked meningeal symptoms. A spinal cord punctuation was made. What anatomic formation was punctured? So, the meninges of the spinal cords, let's look at them because the question is related to them. There are three meninges in the spinal cord: the dura mater, the arachnoid mater, and the pia mater. Now we have the spaces between these various meninges, which we first of all is the epidural space, the space between the dura mater and the vertebral wall containing the fat and many small blood vessels. Then we have the subdural space, which is the potential space that can be opened by separation of the arachnoid mater as a result of trauma pathological process, absence of cerebrospinal fluid as seen in a cadaver. Subdural space or subdural cavity is normally not present. So there is no space between the arachnoid mater and the dura mater. But then we have the subarachnoid space between the arachnoid membrane and the pia mater. It is occupied by a delicate connective tissue and interconnecting channels, and it contains the cerebrospinal fluid inside it, as well as the branches of the arteries and veins. So obviously, when a lumbar puncture is done, then the subarachnoid space is the space which contains the CSF and it must be penetrated. So the space which was punctured is the spadum subarachnoidum, the subarachnoid space which contains the CSF, and this is why lumbar puncture is done, to reach the subarachnoid space. Correct? Good. I hope you understand. So 87th question is that after a section of the middle third of femoral artery obliterated by the thrombus of the lower extremity is supplied with blood due to surgical bypass. Name an artery which plays its role in the establishment of the blood flow. So to understand this, you need to see that there is a thrombus resection of the middle third of the femoral artery. We need to look at the blood supply of femoral artery to understand this a little better. So femoral artery, first of all, is a continuation of the external iliac artery, which is itself a terminal branch of the abdominal aorta. The external iliac artery becomes the femoral artery when it crosses under the inguinal ligament and enters the femoral triangle. So at the site of the femoral triangle, the external iliac artery becomes the femoral artery. Now there are few branches of the femoral artery. The superficial epigastric artery, it contributes to the arterial supply of the anterior abdominal wall below the umbilicus. So the superficial epigastric is in the umbilicus region. It does not go towards the leg. Then we have the superficial circumflex artery, which supplies the blood to the skin and subcutaneous tissue. So it is a cutaneous branch below the inguinal ligament. Then we have the external pudendal arteries, which supplies the male scrotum and female labia majora. So these are the genital branches. Then we have the most important artery over here, the deep femoral artery, which is the largest branch of femoral artery. It is located deep within the thigh and it supplies all the thigh muscles, all the compartments, the anterior, the lateral and the posterior, all compartments of the thigh muscles. Then we have the descending artery of the knee, which participates in the formation of knee joint. So you can see over here that if you need to remove the middle third of the femoral artery, then the artery which can play a role in establishment of the blood flow during the bypass would be the deep femoral artery, because it is located deeply. One of the questions of the hand, we understood that the arcus palmaris profundus, the branch which is located deeper in the palm of the hand, will help in surgical bypass and re-establishing the blood flow. Similarly over here, a deeper branch, which is a larger branch, will help in re-establishing the blood flow of the leg, and this is why deep femoral artery is chosen, and all the other arteries, they cannot be used to re-establish the blood flow during the surgical bypass. So 80th question is that a patient's knee does not extend, there is no knee jerk reflex, and skin sensitivity of the anterior femoral surface is disturbed. What nerve structures are damaged? From the patient's manifestation that the knee joint does not extend, you can obviously know that the nerve which supplies the anterior muscles of the thigh, the femoral nerve, must be injured. Anyway, let's look at the other supplies of the femoral nerve to understand this question a little better. So, femoral nerve is the largest branch of the lumbar plexus. It Motor innervation is the quadriceps muscles, the sartorius muscles, the pectineus muscles, and it supplies the sensory portion to the skin of the anterior distal 3/4 portion of the thigh. And it gives a special branch, the saphenous nerve, which innervates the skin of the lower part of the knee, medial surface of the leg, down to the medial edge of the foot. So according to the patient's manifestation, the knee joint does not extend, which is due to the absence of nerve supply innervation to the muscles of the anterior compartment. There is no knee jerk reflex, which is also due to the femoral nerve, and the skin sensitivity to the anterior femoral surface is disturbed, which again is due to the the femoral nerve. I hope you understand. Let's go to the next one. 89th question is that the electronic microphoto of a kidney fragment has exposed afferent glomerular arteriole, which has giant cells under its endothelium containing secretory granules. Name the type of these cells. So to understand this, let's look some of the cells of the renal apparatus. So first of all, we have our friend the juxtaglomerular cells, the JG cell or the granular cells. Now these cells are the cells that synthesize, store and secrete the enzyme renin. So these are responsible for secretion of renin. They are specially smooth muscle cells located in the afferent arterioles, and some of them can be located in the efferent arterioles that deliver the blood to the glomerulus. So these are the juxtaglomerular cells over here, next to the distal tubule. Correct? Located mostly in the afferent arteriole. They are responsible for secretion of renin. Then we have the macula densa cells. Macula densa cells in the distal nephron. They are located in the distal nephron, not in the artery, afferent arteriole. So they are the salt sensors that generate paracrine chemical signal in the juxtaglomerular apparatus to control kidney function, including renal blood flow, glomerular filtration and renin release. So these cells, they sense the amount of salt and then they tell the juxtaglomerular cells to increase renin release, and also they have another function like maintaining the glomerular filtration. So macula densa cells are just like the sensors, salt sensors of the kidney. Then we have the mesangial cells. The function of mesangial cells is mainly support, and they produce the mesangial matrix and they communicate with the glomerular cells by secreting soluble factors, and they can contribute to the glomerular capillary flow via their contractile proteins. So their main function is to secrete mesangial matrix for the support. Correct? So the last cells are the podocytes. Podocytes are the cell in the Bowman capsule in the kidneys that wrap around the capillaries of the glomerulus. Podocytes make up the epithelial lining of the Bowman's capsule, the third layer through which the filtration of the blood takes place. So you can see these are the various podocytes and they are a part of the filtration membrane. So in the question, let's go to the question. So the question mentioned that there is a fragment exposed of efferent glomerular arteriole which has giant cells which contain secretory granules. So obviously you can understand now that these are the juxtaglomerular cells which secrete renin. Correct? So let's go to the next one. So the last question for today. A 50-year-old patient was admitted to the hospital with complaints about pain behind his breastbone, asphyxia during physical activity. Angiography revealed pathological changes in the posterior interventricular branch of the right coronary artery. What heart parts are affected? So let's look at the blood supply of the heart. So from the aorta, there arises two branches, the left coronary artery and the right coronary artery. So this diagram you can understand it better. And this is the blood supply of the anterior surface of the heart. So the aorta gives the right coronary artery and the left coronary artery, and in the anterior surface, the right coronary artery gives a branch with the right marginal artery, RMA. And also for the right posterior surface of the heart, the right coronary artery gives a branch which is the posterior interventricular artery, the posterior interventricular branch. On the other hand, the left coronary artery gives two branches in the anterior surface of the heart, the left ascending artery, the left ascending this one, the left anterior descending artery, and also it gives the left marginal artery, antagonist, different, similar to the analogous to the right marginal artery, the left marginal artery. And also for the posterior surface of the heart, the left coronary artery gives the circumflex artery branch. So in the question, they told us that the posterior interventricular branch of the right coronary artery has pathological changes. So even from this diagram you can see that the posterior interventricular artery supplies the posterior surface, specifically the right and left ventricles, posterior wall of right and left ventricles. So this is why the answer is A. Let's look at a little more clearly. The left circumflex artery supplies the left atrium and the left ventricle. The left anterior descending artery supplies the right ventricle, left ventricle and interventricular septum. The left marginal artery supplies the left ventricle. The right marginal artery supplies the right ventricle and the apex of the heart. The right coronary artery supplies the right atrium and the right ventricle. And then we have the posterior supply. Posteriorly, the left circumflex artery supplies the left atrium and the left ventricle. The right coronary artery supplies the right atrium and the right ventricle. And the posterior interventricular artery, which we had in the question, supplies the right and left ventricles, the posterior surface, and even the interventricular septum. The right marginal artery supplies the right ventricle and the apex posteriorly, and the left marginal artery supplies the left ventricle in the posterior surface. So these are the main branches of the heart. I hope you understood. So that's all for today. I hope you liked the video, and if you did, please subscribe to the channel if you have not already. Please share the video with your friends. These are the last days of the CROC exam. Less than a month is left. Please prepare well, and if you have any doubts, you can contact us on our Instagram or on our Facebook. And please consider joining us on our Instagram and Telegram. We post daily quizzes over there. We just hosted a very good quiz competition on the Tuesday quiz time. And that's all. Hope you are preparing well. This has been good. See you in the next one.